Hey Space Watchers, and welcome back. We are here at the 39th Space Symposium in Colorado, and my first interview, I have the great honor to welcome Aarti Holla-Maini, the director of UNOOSA. So Aarti, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. This is my very first Space Symposium. I'm looking forward to it. It's in a great setting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an overwhelming environment without any doubt. So last time we met was in Vienna at the World Space Forum, where you introduced the UN Space Bridge. A fantastic initiative, but where are we now? Can you give us some updates?
Absolutely. So I have now been in the post for roughly 6 months, or just over 6 months. The United Nations Space Bridge was an initiative that we announced last year, really to bridge the gap between space and non-space, governments and industry, but also, for example, space agencies on the one hand and telecoms regulators on the other. So we have two initiatives which will happen this year. One will be around the UN General Assembly later on this year, where we will be talking about space situational awareness, SSA, and convening the relevant experts on that to see how do we start embarking on global coordination. And the second one is on atmospheric ablation, where we're working together between UNOOSA on the one hand and UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, on the other, where their stakeholders have really reached out to them and said, we need to know more about this. Is this an emerging problem? Is it an urgent problem? And so we are at the moment in the process of informing ourselves about this relatively new science, and we hope to be able to share that knowledge in a wider community, even if we're right at the beginning of that initiative.
Thank you very much for that update. You mentioned the General Assembly, and I mean, this year is critical for humanity, our future, and space, I would say. So how much space can we expect in the Pact of the future?
We're hopeful. There are two things worth noting. First of all, the Pact of the Future, the wording around space does not come out of COPUS, not out of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which means that it has not been constrained by that process, which is limited to the first 6 months of the year. Portugal has really played a very strong role in convening different member states around this, and we'll have the final in-person conference with them in Lisbon in May. And so far it's looking good. We have one chapter on space. I would have hoped that we could be a little more ambitious in it. At the end of the day, the member states will decide, but whatever they decide, we are really trying to push the global urgency and the operational imperative to make sure that we really advance on the Sustainable Development Goals, leveraging space data and services in particular. And I think that whatever comes out of the Pact for the Future will provide a wonderful backdrop to the future work of the committee.
How can we as press, as civil society, help to not speed up the process, but to support this process?
We really need to continue amplifying the benefits of space, and by that I don't mean just talking randomly about space is very important for climate change and so on, but really talk about case studies, use cases, and what we've seen, because that inspires, that is memorable for people. And you know, the Pact is going to be negotiated in New York. And New York is not the home of COPUS. It doesn't have the historical legacy knowledge around space, and so it's very important that we inspire them from the get-go.
Great. My last question, and that's a tricky one for UN person. Our theme, our SpaceWatch.Global theme for our audience is space innovation, learning from the space nation, United States. I don't want to call it space nation number one, but they are the biggest player in this market. How would you respond to such a statement?
You know, I am going to be moderating a session just after this interview, which is all about collaboration. And yes, we can learn from the ambition and the drive and the investments that the US has put into the space sector. It has brought them to where they are today. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned for other regional groups, for example, the European Union, from that. Forgive me, the EU, for saying that, but it's a reality. But I think we must move away from this notion of a race to space and one nation being first, because it really is about collaboration. Whether we think about this, the Sustainable Development Goals, or whether we think about upcoming outer space activities, habitable world observatory or lunar activities or going to Mars. These are massive challenges and they cannot be done without partnership and collaboration. So I think everybody has to learn to put politics aside and put their best foot forward and scientific and technical and human interests first.
Great. Thank you very much, Aarti, for this interview, and have a wonderful time here at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. And with that, Space Watch out.
Thank you, Torsten.